We'd been together for 3 years, ever since prep school. Victoria and I had never gone more than 3 days without seeing each other. But the moment our families started talking about engagement, she vanished from my life. A full year. She blocked me on everything. iMessage, LinkedIn, even a fake Instagram account I made just to check her stories. The guards at Vance Group, men who'd known me since I was a kid, just gave me that awkward look. "Sorry, Mr. Kingsley." Miss Vance said no outsiders, especially not Noah Kingsley. If I showed up at the same party, she'd turn around and walk away like I was a ghost. Eventually, our mutual friends couldn't stand it anymore. Chloe secretly brought me to Victoria's penthouse. "She has to talk to you, Noah," she whispered, her voice firm. But before we could even ring the bell, Victoria's voice drifted out from inside, cold and sweet, like a knife slicing through ice. "A puppy that knows how to wag its tail is cute," she drawled. "But no one wants to marry a useless man. Just thinking about being engaged to him makes me lose respect for myself." My hand froze on the doorknob. Then I let go. Chloe grabbed my arm, panic in her eyes. "Noah, don't," she whispered. "She's drunk. She didn't mean it. Let me go talk to her." I just shook my head. I didn't want pity. I just wanted to know why. Why did Victoria act like being engaged to me was some kind of disgrace? Something the whole of Manhattan had to gossip about. I'd called her Big Sis Vic for 17 years, but we weren't blood related. If our families had emerged through marriage anyway, why not us? Now I understood. It wasn't because I lacked talent or looks. It was because, in her eyes, I was never a man. I was just decoration, a well-trained puppy raised in a Fifth Avenue mansion. Something to show off during childhood, then toss aside once she got bored. Chloe's voice trembled as she tried to call me. "Harrison Reed's in there. He's probably saying crap. Don't listen to him. Noah, let's just go. I'll call you later." I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "Chloe, take me home. I don't want to see her anymore." "Okay." But as we turned to leave, the penthouse door slid open. Warm light spilled in the dark hallway. And there he was, Harrison Reed, smiling politely, like a goddamn snake. He clearly had no idea what had just gone down outside. He grabbed my arm and pulled me in. "Noah, you made it." That's when I realized the entire party was a setup. A little performance to force Victoria and me to reconcile for the sake of both families. Harrison pushed me onto the couch across from her. "Come on, Miss Vance, don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said smoothly. "Noah just wants to talk. You two grew up together. At least be civil." Victoria didn't even look up. She just stared at her martini, her fingers gripping the glass, so tight it trembled. Chloe shot me a warning glance, but it was too late. Victoria finally lifted her head. Her eyes were cold as marble. "Noah, I told you," she said sharply, her voice slicing through the noise. "Stay away from me. Until my grandfather cancels the engagement contract, I don't want to see you again. Why are you so damn persistent?" I looked down silent. The air froze. Chloe sighed, signaling the others to leave us alone. Victoria lifted her glass and downed it in one gulp. "Do you have any self-respect, Noah?" she sneered. "I'm not interested in you. I've never seen you as a man. If you have that much time to stalk me, maybe use it to become someone worth a damn. Circling around women like this, it's pathetic." She stood, walked to the window, and stared out over Manhattan's skyline. "I'm about to take over Vance Group. I'll be flying to Europe for meetings non-stop. I can't drag some daydreaming boy along with me." In that moment, my heart sank to the bottom of a frozen ocean. So that's all I was, a well-behaved little dog who'd finally outlived his use. "So please," she said quietly, turning to face me, "disappear from my sight. Grandfather will probably cancel the engagement soon anyway." "I get it," I said. My voice sounded strange, distant, even to me. Not shaking anymore, just hollow. "From now on, I won't bother Chloe or anyone else to find you." Memories flashed through my mind. Summer afternoons in the Vance Gardens, Victoria's laughter, the sound that once gave my life meaning. Now it all felt absurd. I'd ignored the disgust in her eyes, pretended not to hear the contempt in her voice when she mocked my suit. I looked up at her one last time. "Victoria Vance," I said quietly. "Thank you for pulling me off the sidewalk that day." I paused, "But from now on, I promise, I'll never bother you again." I turned and walked away, and this time, I didn't look back. When I got home to my empty penthouse on the Upper East Side, I flipped on the lights. The cold white glow spread across the marble walls. Empty, like always. My parents, both archaeologists, were always off somewhere, buried in digs and conferences halfway across the world. My grandfather lived alone in a cabin in Vermont. I grew up surrounded by housekeepers, silence, and space. I remember being 3 years old, running out of the mansion and straight into Fifth Avenue traffic. A taxi screeched to stop. I almost got hit. Victoria had been playing outside our house across the street. She heard me cry, ran over, grabbed my hand, and pulled me to safety. From that day on, I followed her everywhere. Same private schools, same family galas, the same glittering world of glass and lies. When I got bullied, she stood up for me. She taught me how to talk, how to hold my chin up, how to act like a real Vance. She was more present in my life than my own parents. I was addicted to her, like a junkie to his fix. When she started avoiding me a year ago, when she blocked my number, I lost it. My world collapsed. But tonight, standing in this empty apartment, I didn't feel crazy anymore. I didn't feel anything at all. I sat in front of my laptop, staring at the screen. Congratulations. Your exchange study application to London has been approved. My therapist had been right. I needed to leave New York. Leave her. Find somewhere else to breathe. So I left. I didn't tell Victoria. I just sent a short email to my parents, telling them I'd be joining the exchange program. They never replied. In London, I did everything myself. Rented a small flat in Kensington. Filed my papers, got settled. It wasn't as hard as I thought. While waiting for classes to start, I traveled Paris, Amsterdam, Prague. My therapist was right again. Once you break your old patterns, your mind starts to shift. London wasn't New York. It was cold too, but in a different way. After a few petty thefts and one night being followed from the subway, I realized something. There would be no Victoria to pull me out of the street this time. No one was born to protect me. I signed up for Krav Maga and handgun lessons. I had to learn to defend myself. 2 months passed. Then my phone rang. Chloe, Noah, Jesus, you left the country without telling anyone. She cried. We only found out from one of your old classmates. I just came here to study and unwind. I said calmly, I'll be back in a few months. Don't worry. Are you okay? Is it safe there? Everything's fine. Totally safe, I lied. Good, she said softly, hesitating. But, do you want to tell Victoria anything? She's got friends in London, you know. I closed my eyes. No, Chloe, don't bother her. I'm fine. After I hung up, Chloe sat in Victoria's penthouse and sighed. He's different now, she said. Victoria, standing by the window, took a sip of her drink, her face unreadable. You told him not to look for me again, right? No, Chloe replied quietly. He told me not to bother you. Chloe was the only one who'd seen me grow up. She understood. He didn't have parents around, Vic. You were all he had. She said softly, now that he's gone, you still can't sit still, can you? Always pretending you don't care. Victoria rubbed her temples, feeling that tight, suffocating pressure in her chest. She muttered under her breath, a 20-year-old kid doesn't even know what love is. Then she opened her contacts, scrolled to the name Little Brother, and unblocked it. In her sleek New York penthouse, she pressed the intercom. Harrison, come in. Harrison Reed stepped through the door. Immaculate suit, not a wrinkle in sight. That perfect, polished smile. Noah, he flew to London on his own, he said. For a split second, a flicker of satisfaction crossed Harrison's eyes. Gone almost as soon as it appeared. Seems my strategy worked, ma'am, he said smoothly. He's been spoiled his whole life. A dependent boy, without a little cruelty. How would he ever grow up? He walked to the window, staring out at the city. Trust me, ma'am, sometimes, to make someone stronger, you have to let them die once. Victoria sipped her wine, her eyes cold. Noah leaving New York doesn't necessarily mean progress, she said. He might just be playing the keep them guessing game. You know, the old trick. Disappear so they'll chase you. I know that dreamy mind of his too well. Harrison chuckled. He's 20, Vicky, not a kid anymore. A little loneliness never killed anyone. Victoria glanced at him. He had a point. Noah was just inexperienced, confusing attachment for love. Maybe letting him face the world on his own was what he needed. She sighed. Harrison, cancel my flight to London. Meanwhile, in London, that same dreamy boy was pulling the trigger. Bang, bang, bang. The shots rang out across the firing range. I lowered my handgun, exhaling slowly. The instructor nodded. My aim had improved since last week. I placed the weapon carefully back in its case, trying to clear my head. I still had Krav Maga class this afternoon. Stepping out into the damp London air, I felt the drizzle hit my face. Just as I reached the dojo, I froze. A woman stood in my way, burgundy coat, sharp features, piercing blue eyes locked on me. I lowered my gaze, about to move past, but she stepped forward. "Excuse me." Her voice was low, with a hint of Italian. "Are you Noah?" I looked up. "Yes, and you are." The woman smiled, calm, unreadable. "Isabella Marino," she said, "a friend of Victoria Vance. Nice to meet you." I replied stiffly, like I'd learned in prep school. "Victoria asked me to look after you," Isabella said, her blue eyes scanning me, assessing. "She's worried your apartment in Soho isn't safe. I've arranged another place, quieter, more secure. Would you like to move there?" She said like we were discussing the weather, not uprooting my entire life. "You can call Victoria to confirm," she added, noticing my hesitation. She didn't wait. She pulled out her phone, dialed a video call. A few seconds later, Victoria's face appeared, tired, distant. "Noah," she said, "Isabella's part of the Marino family. They're working with my company. Just follow her lead while you're in London." Hearing her voice, my chest tightened. "Still hurts." "All right, thanks," I said quietly. "And Noah," she added coldly, "stop clinging to people like a shadow. Learn to stand on your own 2 feet." "Got it," I muttered. I handed the phone back to Isabella. If Victoria had delegated her, that meant I had no choice. In a foreign country, obedience was the safest strategy. I followed Isabella to the waiting Bentley. On the ride, she called her staff, instructing them to pack up my things in Soho. An hour later, after a silent dinner at an Italian restaurant, the car turned down a long, tree-lined drive leading to the Marino estate. A line of servants stood ready at the gates. "And don't call me Ms. Marino anymore," Isabella said as we entered the grand hall. "Makes me feel ancient." I gave her a puzzled look. "We've met before," she explained with a fleeting smile. "At the Vance house. You were 7. You ran into my leg in the garden and cried your eyes out." She chuckled softly. "I still remember. You were sobbing, but trying so hard not to. Wiping your tears, mumbling, 'Noah doesn't cry. Noah's good.'" My heart tightened. Maybe I'd been used to hurting without anyone to comfort me. Isabella studied me for a long moment, like she was rereading an old book she'd once loved. She didn't know that in the file Harrison sent her this morning, I was just a boy the world had forgotten. She'd once thought, if no one wants him, I'll take him. And now she had. As we passed the second-floor landing, a maid bowed. "Madame Marino, Mr. Noah, I thought you'd be staying in the South Wing." I glanced at Isabella. She just smiled. "My cousin's taking that suite," she said. "I think this one suits him better." The next few days drifted by in strange quiet. Isabella was like a refined version of Victoria, but better. She was present. She gave me a small art studio on the 3rd floor. While I was in training, I painted all day. Sometimes she'd step in from her office next door, teasing that she was collecting pieces from her promising young artist. Knowing I practiced shooting and martial arts, she even trained me herself. "Your strikes are too soft, Noah. Be decisive." Then she noticed my wardrobe, all gym clothes. The next morning, my room overflowed with Tom Ford and Dior homme, each outfit styled and hung. For the first time, when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I thought life might stay that peaceful, until one day, something shifted. The butler knocked, looking grim. "Mr. Noah, the estate needs a security overhaul," he said. "You'll stay at a hotel for a few days. The driver and staff will accompany you." My throat tightened, that old cold feeling. "So, Isabella's coming too?" I asked, forcing my voice steady. That familiar dread of being left behind crept in. The butler hesitated. "Madam has to fly to Zurich on business." I nodded, fists clenched, swallowing the bitterness in my throat. "All right, when do we leave?" "Right now if we're ready." "Fine, give me a minute." I shut my bedroom door, staring at my reflection. I almost laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "It's okay, Noah," I whispered. "Nothing ever really changes." 3 months in Isabella Marino's world. 3 months where I almost felt safe. I thought thought maybe I found someone on the same wavelength. But in the end, she was just busy. Everyone's always busy. I grabbed my bag and headed downstairs. The mansion was eerily quiet. Most of the staff had gone. Only the butler and driver stood still near the glass doors like statues. A thought crossed my mind, and I laughed under my breath. What? Did Isabella go bankrupt? Terrible joke. My throat was dry. I motioned for the butler and walked toward the bar for water. I still wasn't used to the place. It wasn't that big, but everything screamed luxury in a way that felt foreign. Then I heard it, the sound of glass shattering. It came from a room behind a half-closed door, one I'd never noticed before. Strange. Everyone should have been gone by now. Maybe her cat. No, she didn't have one. Couldn't be anyone. But curiosity. Curiosity kills the weak. I turned back to the kitchen counter, picked up a small fruit knife, and eased the door open. It wasn't a room. It was a staircase leading down to a basement. Rare, in the middle of London. A dim yellow light glowed below. Step by step, I descended. At the bottom stood a sleek metal door with a keypad. I hesitated. This wasn't my business. Then I heard it. A faint sound. A muffled groan. Just one. But I knew that voice. Isabella's. I pushed the door. It wasn't locked. She was sitting on the floor, half in shadow, a shattered wine bottle beside her. In one hand, a jar of glass, the other bleeding. Wine spread across the wooden floor like dark red ink. I stood frozen, torn between leaving and doing what I always did, saving people who didn't want to be saved. Finally, I stepped closer, voice trembling. Isabella, are you okay? Her body stiffened. She looked up, those sharp, controlled eyes now wide with panic and exhaustion. Noah, she whispered, startled. How did you even get in here? She tried to smile, fragile, trembling. Didn't the butler take you already? Her calm mask slipped, just for a moment, before she forced a soft smile again. I hesitated, regret creeping in. I should let you rest. Just wrap that hand, okay? I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. Barely a whisper, pleading. Don't go, I froze. I won't scare you, she murmured. Just couldn't sleep. Old nightmares. Noah, would you stay with me a while? Back upstairs. The butler was still waiting by the elevator. Mr. Noah, your decision? I'll stay with her, I said firmly. She probably called you already. Yes, sir, he bowed. She's not ill. It's the anniversary of her mother's death. She loses control around this time. I nodded silently, grabbed the first aid kit, and headed back down to the basement. This room didn't look like a basement. It looked like a hidden, luxury studio apartment. There was a small bed in the corner. I grabbed the first aid kit, helped her sit, and began cleaning the mix of wine and blood from her hand. The glass had cut deep. Aren't you gonna ask? She whispered, watching me wrap the bandage. No, I said, but if you want to talk, I'll listen. There's nothing to talk about, she murmured, then fell silent. She couldn't sleep. I was an insomniac too, so I understood. I stayed, said nothing, just opened Netflix on my iPad. We sat there like that, in the quiet of her secret basement. 3 days later, Isabella was herself again. She stood up, cold and composed as ever, and let me out. The staff acted like nothing had happened, but I knew, between us, something had changed, something unspoken, impossible to name. Noah, can you help me with something? I was upstairs finishing my final painting. I turned around. Isabella was lounging in a leather chair, her gaze curved in that way that made everything feel like a game. Of course, I said, putting my brush down. I haven't even told you what it is yet, she laughed. I shrugged, wiping my hands. With your power and money, there's not much I can help with, except myself. Maybe you need a portrait, or a date to some event. Smart boy, she said. I want you to come with me to Mrs. Guardiola's gala. She loves introducing eligible bachelors to me every time we meet. I'm done with that nonsense. Lucky you showed up when you did. I agreed without hesitation. I wasn't raised among the elite, but I knew how to survive there. The next morning, Isabella herself brought a tailored tux to my room. Tonight, she said softly, though her tone left no room for refusal, you're mine. Smoke blue Tom Ford, fitted to perfection. Satin tie, sharp lines, elegant, arrogant. A sculpture that breathed. The stylist fixed my collar, slicked my hair back. Clean, cold. The very image of Manhattan air. I stood on the second floor balcony of the Isabella, sitting below, looked up when she heard my footsteps. When our eyes met, her ocean blue gaze widened, stunned. She walked up the stairs slowly, stopping one step below me. I leaned forward, offered my hand, and smiled, really smiled. "Princess Marino, shall we go steal the spotlight tonight?" She laughed, crystal bright, over the jazz playing below. "You're such a kid," she teased, but placed her hand in mine. As we began to descend, she suddenly paused. I looked up. Her eyes had softened, stripped of their usual steel. "Noah," she whispered, "this is the first time you've smiled since you came to London. Do you know why I chose this suit for you?" I shook my head. "Don't dim your own light just because some people are too blind to see it," she said. "You're already beautiful. Inside now." The party went smoothly. No rich boys hovered around her as she'd warned. Instead, the Vanderbilts seemed far more interested in me. When the waltz began, Isabella pulled me onto the floor. She moved with effortless grace. I teased, "Miss Marino, seems like your charm's slipping tonight. I thought I was here to be your shield." Isabella smiled faintly, her eyes locked on mine. "Maybe," she whispered, "it's because one particular boy is outshining the whole room." I looked up and met that gaze, calm yet burning. Over the months, I come to realize she treated me differently. It wasn't pity, it wasn't politeness. It was something like possession, and maybe a touch of madness. Her voice was low, rich as cello tones. "I want to be like a gardener," she said, "raising a flower until it blooms, then spending my life just watching it, even as it fades." Her hand tightened around mine before she leaned against me. "Sorry, lost my balance," she murmured, but didn't pull away. "Miss Marino," I said quietly, "you must have skipped poetry class in Milan." That's one corny confession. I joked, but my heart already understood. The song ended. I started to move, but she caught me, wrapped her arms around my neck, and kissed me. Whispers rippled through the crowd, but Isabella didn't care. Still kissing me, she dragged me out of the ballroom, into her Rolls Royce, and ordered Hamptons. Neither of us spoke the whole drive. The silence inside the car was thick, only the soft hum of the engine breaking it. When we arrived, the moment we crossed the threshold, she kissed me again, gentle but unrelenting. Her hand slipped into mine as she led me through the marble hall, across the moonlit garden of white roses. Only then did she finally let go. "You never pushed me away," she said hoarsely. And she was right. This woman wasn't fragile. She was a force who'd built her own empire. "What is it you like about me?" I asked. I needed to know. "Everything," she said. "From the first time I saw you at the Brooklyn Rage. I watched for a long time. You looked fragile, like one touch could shatter you. But there was something about you that made it impossible to look away." She stepped closer, her eyes stripping me bare. "The way you're alone, the way you expect everyone to leave, yet still paint the world in white. It's all part of my aesthetic." My breath caught. She knew. "The maid who hit you when you were a kid, she's better now. The classmates who trash-talk you around Victoria all got anonymous threats. That creep in Paris who harassed you, you cracked his head open with a trash bin." She knew everything. Isabella smiled, a dangerous, possessive smile. "A little tiger wearing a puppy's skin," she whispered. "Perfect enough to drive me insane." I slapped her hand away from my face. "Instinctive, defensive. This obsession of yours," I said, voice rough. "It's sick." "And if it is?" Isabella didn't back off. Her eyes darkened. That dangerous smile returned. "In that basement under the mansion," she whispered, stepping closer. "When you stayed there those 3 days, I thought, how wonderful it would be if you were mine forever." Her fingers traced my cheek, slid down my neck, tightening. Not enough to hurt, just enough to remind me who was in control. My life, right there, held in her hands, strong, stubborn, absolute. "Be mine, Noah," she commanded softly. "I'll be your family, your friend, your lover, everything you need. In return, you'll have all my love, my wealth, my body, my soul. No one will ever come between us." In that moment, time stopped. Her words, "all my love," they pulled me in like a spell. I'd spent my whole life searching for something, someone who wouldn't leave. And there she was, offering me everything. I heard myself say, "Okay." Then she pulled me in, her kisses, hungry, consuming. like she was giving me life and taking my soul in the same breath. The next morning, I woke to the sound of phone ringing. I always keep it on silent. The noise irritated me. I was about to throw the damn thing when a soft hand touched my cheek. Her hand brushed my cheek, and somehow, my anger began to fade. "It's okay," Isabella whispered, her voice low and soft against my ear. "It's just my phone. Easy now." She picked it up, glanced at the screen, and set it back down. Didn't answer, didn't hang up. I opened my eyes. Isabella Marino was lying in my arms, fully awake. She lifted her head, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Victoria's calling. You hear that, Noah?" She leaned in, kissed me softly, the scent of her perfume lingering on my lips. "Let me talk to her." I gave her a look, but Isabella only smiled, teasing, pretending to speak to Victoria through the phone. "I heard you let me borrow Noah for the party at the plaza last night. Thanks for that. He's a little clumsy at those things. Hope he didn't bother you too much." I coughed lightly. I hadn't bothered Isabella at all. In fact, I'd been very well behaved. So well behaved, I was in her bed. For a moment, I hated myself for letting this woman, 6 years older, all grace and control, pull me in her arms like some luxurious toy she decided to keep. "Sweetheart," she murmured as my phone started ringing again. "Someone's calling you." She handed it to me lazily. "It's good you're still an early riser, baby." Victoria probably thought I was up for breakfast. I didn't bother to explain. I picked up, said a few bland words, then hung up. On the other end, Victoria and her friends were standing on the Hamptons golf course. Victoria stared at her phone, eyes darkening at the sound of my sleepy voice, and Isabella's in the background. "Told you." One of the Fairchild girls giggled beside her. "My sister went to Mrs. Guardiola's party last night and saw Noah Kingsley, Victoria's little brother. She sent me pictures. I didn't know you'd been hiding such a good-looking guy." "Let me see," Victoria snapped. Sure." The girl barely unlocked her phone before Victoria snatched it away. The album had over a dozen shots. Me and Isabella arm in arm at the entrance. Me in a Tom Ford tux dancing with her under the crystal lights. And then, Isabella pinning me against the wall, kissing me, dragging me away. The Fairchild girl kept rambling. "See, they're definitely together. My mom told me to network with CEO Marino, but looks like she already has her own pet." She laughed. "And seriously, Noah's ridiculously handsome." Victoria's expression turned to ice. "Hey Vic, easy. You're gonna break my phone." The girl squealed. Chloe, our mutual friend, sighed, glancing at the photo before offering weak comfort. "Come on, Vic. At least Noah is finally showing up in public and wearing a suit. That's progress, right?" Oof. Victoria shoved Chloe's hand off her shoulder, grinding out the words, "Isabella Marino." From that night on, I felt like my world tilted off its axis. The next morning, I woke up in her penthouse. Isabella was already in her study, and I wandered in half asleep. The New York sunlight poured through the glass. She pulled me in her chair, sat on my lap, and began flipping through papers. "What's this?" I asked. She dropped a thick folder on the desk. "Property transfer documents. Everything under my name," she said casually. "The penthouse on the Upper East Side, the Hamptons villa, all transferred you." She turned another page. "Shares in Marino Global, both U.S. and Italian branches. A generous portion goes to you." I just stared. "You're insane," I whispered. "And if I say no? If I take it all and disappear?" Isabella laughed softly, a sound both tender and terrifying. "You're right, we're both insane. Two crazies fighting each other. That's fate." She traced her fingers along my jaw. "And baby, that shocked look of yours, like a drenched kitten, is just too cute. Maybe I should give you more." I covered her mouth to hide my grin. Women hitting midlife sure get dramatic. But I didn't care. She was the woman I'd chosen. So I play along. "Noah." Isabella breathed against my neck. "From now on, this is our home." Morning lights spilled in, the scent of coffee mixing with her Tom Ford perfume, until the air felt too sweet to breathe. I drew a deep breath. For the first time, I was happy. We had a home. And then my phone rang. I flinched. I always kept it on silent. Isabella smiled, kissing the edge of my ear. Since learning how to ringtone startled me, she had changed it to her own recorded humming. Her voice melted through the room, soft, soothing, but with something possessive in every note. I glanced at the iPad screen. Mom, calling from the Upper East Side penthouse. Answer it, Isabella whispered, kissing my ear again. Her perfume clouded my thoughts. I straightened my tie, though I wasn't wearing one, and took the call. My mother's face appeared, her penthouse backdrop behind her. Noah, when are you coming back to New York? In about 5 months, I said, trying to sound calm while Isabella's hand traced my neck. Mr. Vance is throwing his birthday gala in the Hamptons next week, she said. You should attend. Why didn't you call Victoria about it? I sighed. Are you two doing okay? We're fine, I said. But Mom, please, stop calling me for things like this. All right, dear, she said, clearly not understanding a word. I stared at the black screen after the call ended. Silence. Only Isabella's steady breathing behind me. Isabella, I began, my voice rough. You know, I don't feel pain anymore, I said, turning to face her. Even the fact that she hates me. I don't care why anymore. She turned me toward her, eyes meeting mine. Her cold hand slid into my hair, and she kissed my forehead, gentle, almost like a blessing. Good boy. And I broke. My body trembled as tears spilled out, soaking her silk blouse. I buried my face in her chest, gasping like someone learning to breathe after drowning. Cry, she whispered, holding me tighter. Then forget. For now on, no one gets to make you bow your head again. We returned to New York a day before Chairman Vance's gala. I brought Isabella to my family's penthouse overlooking Central Park West. That night, she lost it when she found Victoria's old sketches in my studio. The only things I kept from my old apartment. I didn't argue. I just held her and murmured, I'll paint again. This time, only you, in a sky with no one else in it. When Isabella linked her arm through mine and we stepped into the ballroom, the crystal lights made the whole room shimmer. The most powerful people in Manhattan were there. Victoria was somewhere in the crowd, but before I could find her, Isabella was already surrounded by reporters and investors. She was a shark, and this was her ocean. I slipped away, quietly, hiding near the dessert table where no one noticed. Old habits. Noah Vance. I looked up. Harrison Reed, Victoria's executive assistant. Same white suit. Same perfect, fake smile. I said nothing. He pulled out a chair beside me, poured himself champagne. Thought you finally cut yourself off from Victoria, he said, low mocking. Guess old habits die hard. Harrison smirked, swirling his Bordeaux. The Kingsley boy, he murmured, voice silky but venomous. You should know your place. Stop clinging to the Van Cess like some obedient pet waiting to be patted. He glanced at me with that smug expression. You have no idea how much her mother despises you, do you? A nameless kid, abandoned. You really think you belong at their table? Then he squinted, lips curling. You got a decent face, though. Planning to be the CEO's obedient little housewife. The tiramisu in my hand suddenly tasted bitter. He knew about my past, about my mental breaks. He knew these words would sting. I used to snap, but not tonight. Tonight, I just felt tired. I wanted to break that perfect jaw of his. But this was Chairman Vance's gala. Every punch had a price. I stood up to leave, to let it go like the barking of a dog. Then he grabbed my wrist. Oops. Red wine splashed across my white suit, spreading fast. Noah, don't be so sensitive, he said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. You don't need to get jealous of every man around Victoria. A cheap performance. I turned, and there she was. Victoria, guiding her father out, her mother, Mrs. Vance, right behind. Noah, you again. Victoria frowned, her cold gaze sweeping over the wine stain on my vest before stopping on Harrison, who looked like some poor victim. Noah, Mrs. Vance said sharply, her tone dripping with judgment. This is Chairman Vance's birthday party. You're not Victoria's fiancé yet. Don't make a scene like a child. What did I teach you? Chairman Vance slammed his cane against the marble floor. Jealousy at a formal event. Shameful. Go home and learn some manners. I almost laughed. No. Isabella's voice cut through the air like a blade. She was marching toward me, eyes glinting. I caught her hand as she reached me, gave it a gentle squeeze. It's fine, babe, I whispered. I've got this. Harrison was cowering behind Victoria, pretending to be the weak one, while Mrs. Vance patted his shoulder like he was some poor misunderstood soul. I watched, smiling faintly. Then I pulled a silver recorder from my pocket and flicked it on, volume all the way up. Harrison's arrogant voice echoed through the grand hall. An orphan, abandoned, and you think you deserve a seat at the same table as the Vance family. You've got a pretty face, trying to play the obedient mistress of the CEO. Don't play the innocent card, Noah. One glass of wine is all it takes for me to make you disappear from the city. The room froze. The music stopped. Faces around us shifted. Shock, disgust, pity. The great Vance family stripped bare under the baccarat chandeliers. Harrison's face turned pale as wax. An old money family behaving like that. A lady scoffed softly. Poor Kingsley boy. I'd take him for a son-in-law any day. I smiled, the kind of smile you learn at networking events. Switching off the recorder, I said calmly, "Oh, and by the way, to celebrate the chairman's birthday, I also brought a camera hidden in my button. Maybe we should play the footage next." Misunderstanding, just a misunderstanding. Chairman Vance shouted, raising his cane, then struck Victoria's leg instead. "What's that secretary you brought here for? To disgrace the Vance name?" Mrs. Vance grabbed my hand quickly, flustered. "No, my fault. I just didn't want you led astray, dear. You're like a son to me." I nodded, slipping my hand free. "Right. About that. Did you just say engagement? Victoria and I are childhood friends. We never agreed to that. So please, don't make things up." I glanced at Victoria, frozen in place. "Right, Vic? Your secretary's quite the snake. Without that recording, I'd be the one getting blamed. Not even a fiancé yet, and already pulling stunts like this. Classy. They really thought I was still the obedient little dog." I chuckled softly, took Isabella's hand, the woman watching me now with a strange, possessive gleam. "Darling," I murmured, "did I do something wrong? Why do they all hate me so much? I just wanted to introduce my girlfriend." Isabella pulled me into her arms, pressing a soft kiss on my head. "Come on, let's get out of here, sweetheart." She tilted her head slightly, smile fading as she glanced toward Chairman Vance, silently saying, "We're done here. It's clear we're not welcome. Happy birthday, Father." And with that, she wrapped an arm around me and let me out. "No, wait." Victoria finally shouted after us, but Isabella and I just shared a smile. We didn't stop. Back in my villa, as soon as the door shut, Isabella shoved me against the wall like a hungry wolf, her lips crashing into mine. Desire hit me hard. My mind went blank. My body melted in her breath. "Noah," she whispered, "do you have any idea how irresistible you are? The way you cling like a little puppy, it drives me insane." I loved it. I craved that kind of love, one that claimed me, marked me. I wrapped my arms around her waist, burying myself in her warmth. "Maybe it's because I have you behind me that I can do all this," I murmured. "I've always been weak, vindictive even, but now that I've got someone to lean on, whoever hurts me, I'll bite back." She laughed, pulling me closer. "Good, and if you don't bite hard enough, I'll help you." The next morning, the doorbell rang. "Victoria, so your thing with Isabella, was that just to provoke me?" she rasped. "Don't drag outsiders into our mess." "She's not an outsider," I said flatly. "She's my girlfriend. You and Isabella." Victoria snapped. "Do you even know what you're doing? She's 6 years older than you." I shrugged. "Only 6. She doesn't treat me like a kid." "No." Victoria grabbed my arm. "You don't understand. Isabella's mother drove her father to his death. She was a control freak, manipulative, abusive. Her dad fell into depression and jumped off a building right in front of her." Tears streamed down her face. "Isabella's just as cruel." I smiled faintly, looking down. "I know Victoria. I saw it the first time I met her, but isn't that exactly what I want?" I said softly, "Someone who controls, and someone who depends. It fits perfectly. She doesn't hate that I'm clingy. She never leaves me alone. Victoria, Isabella is my other half. I always wanted someone who'd make me their world, control me, love me, make me feel safe," I said. "We complete each other." When Victoria left, I opened my bedroom door. Isabella was standing there, less than 10 steps away. She'd heard everything. She smiled and opened her arms. "Isabella." I rushed into her embrace. Part 22. Aftermath. 7 years later, we raced cars on private tracks. We went to auctions, where I bid just to see her smile. Meanwhile, Victoria was drunk in some bar. Why? She muttered to Chloe. Why won't O come back for me? Harrison, yeah. I fired him. He tried to tear us apart. Noah, I'm sorry. Chloe exhaled smoke, eyes heavy. She'd always known. Victoria's feelings for Noah were never just sisterly. But people only realize what matters after they've lost it. 7 years of marriage passed. Isabella and I got into the same elite university, traveled the world, did charity together. Next month, we're going to Antarctica. I've cut all ties with my biological parents. As for Victoria, her path is nothing but fog now. She married Harrison Reed. After I left, he drugged her one night when she was drunk. The scandal blew up, and to save face, the Vance family forced them to marry. After that, Harrison burned through Vance's money, dragged his brothers into the company, and tore the whole group apart. Now, they're divorcing, and he's demanding half of Vance Group's assets. Mrs. Vance somehow got my new number, but Isabella answered. I've given her full power to handle everything. No one's allowed to disturb our life anymore. Isabella checked the clock. It was almost time for me to wake. She picked out my clothes, while outside, wisteria bloomed in violet waves along the terrace. Let's wear matching purple today, she whispered, kissing my forehead. Good morning, my other half.